Hey guys, Karaoke here. I want to talk to you about some basic strategy for PvP. When I say basic strategy, I mean this is a strategy that is useful for newer players, for players who don't know the game mode all that well yet. It is a strategy that you will eventually want to move away from, right? Like, this is not something that is going to get you into MLG, esports, pro mode, anything. But this should hopefully help you, if you're newer to the game, learn a little bit about what you should be doing in the match and what does not work as well. But again, the focus here is going to be talking about what I call the 3 8s. So what are the 3 8s? They are initiate, communicate, and rotate. And as a newer player, if you can keep these 3 things in mind, I think you're going to be off to a much better start in PvP. So what I mean by initiate is be smart about when you initiate contact with other players. So, for example, if you're running up to a point and you see 2 enemy players sitting on that point, do not initiate contact. Get out of there. However, if your team has a capture point that you guys own and you see 1 player heading toward it, go ahead and initiate contact with that player, get on the point and try and fight them. The idea here is to be smart about when you're fighting and when you're running. And I think it makes sense to initiate contact in any fight that you're confident you will win. In that case, you know, go ahead and have that fight. But also keep in mind the length of time that it might take. So if you see a point that maybe you want to capture, and there's somebody really tanky on it, and you know it's going to take, you know, a minute, 2 minutes, or some really long length of time to get that point from that person, it may not be worth initiating contact. Whereas if you see maybe a squishy target you know you can kill quickly, you can go ahead and jump on them and grab that point. So the initiate part of the 3 8s, just be smart about when you're going to go into a fight. Anytime before you start to run into battle, think to yourself, am I running into a losing fight? 1 in, Ellie.
For great justice.
Oh, but they're after a fight.
Now, that said, you don't always get to control when you fight and when you don't. So if somebody does jump on you and you need help, that gets us to our second 8, communicate. Communicate with your team members to say, hey, I've got incoming on this node, something that I'm trying to keep, I need help here. And a lot of times the communication, because the games go pretty quick, is just by pinging on the map. You don't necessarily have the time to pull up chat and type out some long story about it. So keep an eye on map pings from team members, ping your own map when you need it, and just let your teammates know what you're doing and when you're going to need help. I also find that communication is really important and often underutilized at the beginning of a match, just in the initial spread. Just about every time I pop into a match, I tell people where I'm going, and since I play, you know, crappy face roll warrior builds, that usually means I'm going to the mid fight. I can't tell you the number of times we've been on a map and nobody goes to get home, or it's always fun when you're on the forest map, Forest of Niflhel, or however you pronounce it, and you get 5 people who run straight to the boss to kill it at the beginning, and nobody goes to any other points. So communication can help fix a lot of those problems. Make sure you talk to your teammates, make sure they know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and make sure you call for help and respond to help. Which kind of gets us into the third 8, rotate. Rotate in PvP just means don't stand on a point, be, you know, moving through the map as you need to. So this can happen in a few different ways. If you're, say, in a fight one-on-one with somebody and they send another player, so it's a 2-on-1, your short side, and you don't have any other players who are going to be showing up, rotate out of that fight. You know, if you have a way to leave that fight, and most meta builds do have ways to escape fights, then go ahead and leave that fight. You're going to lose it anyway. You're better off leaving the fight, giving them that point, and going somewhere where you can be helpful for your team. One thing to keep in mind is that the process of being downed, stomped, waiting to respawn, and then getting back into a fight can take a very long time. It can take 30, 40 seconds to go from being downed to getting back into the game. So that's 30, 40 seconds in games that often only last 10 minutes where you're completely useless to your team. That's going to happen. Sometimes you're going to get stomped. But what you want to try to do is avoid it when it's unnecessary. So don't hang out in a losing 2v1. get off that point, go somewhere else, and be of use to your team. It's also important to rotate when your team members need help. So if you know you have good burst, you can kill people, and you see that somebody in your party is fighting somebody, maybe they're in a one-on-one, it's fine to go into that fight and help them down the person and then move on to the next fight. Rotating also means if you and a team member are running to a point to cap it and there's nobody there, don't stand on the point capping it with somebody else. There's no reason to have 2 or 3 people standing on a point capping it. So if somebody's standing on an empty node and they're capturing it, run somewhere else, rotate out of that, and go somewhere where you can be of help. So your mindset should always be, you know, should I engage this person, yes or no? Do I need help, and should I call for it, yes or no? Is it worth being in this fight, or should I leave and go somewhere else, you know, yes or no? If you keep asking yourself those questions as you play, you're going to find that you're going to be a lot more effective, you'll be in more fights that matter, and you'll be helping your team win those fights. So those are the 3 8s: initiate, communicate, and rotate.